Hey y'all, it's Sarah, and I want to talk to you about diamonds. They say diamonds are a girl's best friend. I don't know about that. I think it's crafts, but I want to mix the two and show you how to do this diamond background in the faux wood look. You guys have seen some projects. If you're on the group, you've seen me post some projects, and I've never actually stopped to show this particular background. And I want to be able to show this because this is a really cool background. I've done a deer head one and just done it as a piece like this and a couple other things. But these are so fun because you could throw, now I just have this handy just because I just did kind of a Dollar Tree haul and mine just put out all the great fall and Halloween stuff. But you could put just about anything in the middle of this and just have it look like such an amazing piece. So I'm going to show how to do this. As a matter of fact, I think I want to get into doing some backgrounds that can be really fun. So I may do a few videos for a small series of just backgrounds like this, creating visually interesting pieces. I want to go ahead and jump into this. You'll see a lot more of this, but let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to tell you what all I'm using. First things first, if you're looking at this, wondering what this material is, this is Readi-board brand foam board or foam core. And as you can see, this looks a lot like poster board, except for it's thicker. It's got this foam center here with a thin paper lining on both sides. I prefer the paper lining. You get the better faux wood results. This comes in a 20 by 30 sheet. You can find it most of your retailers, Wal-mart, Dollar Tree, Dollar General, pretty much all of your dollar type stores. It's $1 or less a sheet typically. In 20 by 30, that's a pretty good size to work with. I always recommend cutting it at the 30-inch length. I'm not sure if you guys can see this, but it is manufactured this 30-inch length direction. There are ripples in it that can affect your paint finish and your ability to cut this. So I always cut my major cuts at this 30-inch length. This video is being sponsored by Readi-board. And I want to go ahead and show you the paints that I'm using. I am not complicating this one. As a matter of fact, this may be one of the easiest ways to get a paint job. You can get your kids involved with this, and I'll show you why. This is what I'm going to be using. You can see I only have one paint tray out right now as opposed to several. I'm going to mix these colors. It's not going to matter. We're going to get all these different tonal effects using the Waverly chalk paint in ink. We've got the Waverly wax in clear and the Waverly wax in antique. And I just have those poured in these little containers to make it easy for me to use. I've got half of a Dollar Tree kitchen sponge that I'm going to use to flick across my edges. I've got my half of my little Dollar Tree bath sponge. This is what gives me that great graining look. So that's pretty much all with the paint. Nothing major, but I do want to tell you this quick tip that we're going to be using. I'm going to be using some contact paper. Because these pieces are individual, I'm going to show you kind of a little bit of a hack to make this a little simpler. It doesn't matter what pattern it is. The contact paper is not part of the project. It's part of the tools that we're using to create this project. All of that being said, I'm going to move this piece out of the way. And I want to talk to you about how to get these particular cuts. Now let's talk about this cutting. So I've got my tools here that I'm going to use. I do want to tell you that this is one of the few times that I'm going to say that getting really clean cuts on your edges can affect this project. Typically, I don't really care personally if I've got some edges that are not so great. Usually that kind of blends in and it adds to that rustic appeal. This one, we want our edges really crisp and sharp because we need to be able to fit those pieces together very accurately. For those of you that still struggle with hand cutting this, I am going to recommend, I'm using a self-healing cutting mat. It has a lot of drag when you pull that blade across, and it can affect how you cut, and it can get really tiresome because it adds more drag to using this blade. I would suggest take apart a cardboard box and lay it flat and use that as your cutting surface. It is so much easier. It's really strange that I would say that, even though I've got the self-healing mat. It's awkward for me to use cardboard in a video because the piece that I typically use is really, really large. So if you're wanting to get accurate cuts for these, or just accurate cuts in general, rather than using this, my personal preference is a cardboard box. Now, this is one of those moments you're really going to realize why I treasure this 3-inch wide Fiskars ruler and why I use so many 3-inch wide strips. This is why. This ruler was my starting point. It was convenient as far as sizing and holding it and all of that and working with it. It just worked out. So I'm going to use this ruler really in all its handiness for this project. You would adapt and adjust this depending on what size diamonds you wanted. Mine are going to be using these 3-inch measurements, but be sure to consider that if you're doing like maybe a wider strip to get a larger diamond, let's say you're going 4 or 5 inches, you're going to measure out the same, whatever your width of your strip is. So to start this out, it's very simple. We're going to do it just like a miter. I'm going to come here to this 3-inch because we want to mark ourselves out a perfect square. That's going to give us a 45-degree angle to start with. We're going to want to cut from here to here, right on the diagonal. You guys can see that I've got plenty of my poster tack, my little blue Dollar Tree poster tack stuck to my ruler. That makes this a lot easier. It doesn't slide around. You can see it doesn't slide straight off of this. It's much more slippery without those. So I've pulled off this first scrap piece. Now I have this gorgeous sharp angle. And I didn't point out when I was doing that angle, but I'll show you when I go to cut. So I am aligning this ruler with this 45. I'm going to start marking just like that. So all the way across, I am marking on that 45 angle using the 3-inch width of this ruler. And it's going to basically give you a candy cane. By the time you are done marking this, it's going to give you like candy cane level stripes. You're going to go all the way across. You get 6 diamonds. If you're going by these dimensions, you're going to get 6 of these diamond shapes out of one 3-inch strip. Now, when you're trying to figure out how many diamonds it's going to take to finish your project, just assume that depending on what your backer size is, your base piece, for your overall project size, you're going to need at least another full sheet worth of diamonds cut down, and sometimes a little extra because there are pieces at the edge that you have to kind of fit in. And you'll see what I mean as we go to put this together. So to get these cleanest cuts, dull blade, fresh blade, I keep blades all over. I have no clue how old this blade is, but the bigger, more important part is to keep these really sharp, really clean to fit together. I'm going to start up here with my cut. That way when it hits right here, it's already got all the pressure going. I've got my mojo going on the cutting, and so I get this amazing crisp line. It works out a lot better doing that than if you try to start and push in right there. A lot of times you crunch that point down as you go to do that. So when you start a little above it, you get these perfectly sharp angled corners or angled tips. Now, for those of you that have the Logan mat cutter like I do, you can always do them on that as well. And I don't have mine in my space to show you a cheat on that one, but there are a couple hacks to do these diamonds with the Logan. And I do plan on doing a different diamond one, so maybe I'll remember to have my mat cutter out and show you some shortcuts on doing that. Now, the thing I want to say about these diamonds is that there is a lot of ability to play with this particular shape. So here's another scrap. This is all that's left out of it. We'll toss those to the side. I want to show you how much fun these little diamond shapes can be. These remind me a whole lot. I get excited playing with these because it reminds me, brings out the kid in me, and it reminds me of when the teacher used to pull out the tangram things, the little kind of shaped pieces that you had to put together to create an image or whatever. But you can see, if you want to do chevron patterns, this is how you get some amazing little diamonds to get a nice chevron pattern. And this is what I'm talking about when I said that I am likely to do maybe a little series of videos on background shapes and background patterns. You can see how fun this is to play with. I don't particularly have enough pieces in front of me, but you can kind of see where that's going. So my project is going to be 20 by 20 because that's what the backer piece that I have to show you guys is. And in that, it's going to take roughly about 36 strips or 36 diamonds possibly. And that really just depends on how it lays out on there. But I want to talk to you about painting this, getting these painted. Now, you're going to ask yourself, why wouldn't I just paint those strips and then cut them down into that diamond shape and just save myself from trying to paint these individual pieces? And I want to tell you this is why. You can explain this to yourself. This is one that was cut from a faux painted wood board. Now you can see, I don't really know what order these were cut out in, but they're all very similar because they came from the same, they came from the same strip. No matter which way I do these to try to make my diamond pattern, and you can see my Harlequin pattern or whatever you want to call that, whatever way that I go to make that Harlequin pattern, it doesn't matter if I turn it this way. It doesn't matter if I turn it this way. It almost realigns your graining. So by the time it is all said and done, you are going to lose the pattern look that we're trying to achieve. So by the time these were all lined up, you're just basically going to get something like this. And you can see I can switch those out. It doesn't really matter. It's still going to look basically the same. That is why we're going to paint these individually. We've got to get the graining going a different direction. And this is where I want to show you this little cheat with the contact paper. This is something I've used for a long time as a paper crafter, doing small little pieces, shading those and that kind of thing. So I have taken a piece of this contact paper and I'm going to stick it down to my surface. Now, if your surface is stickable, you can just fold these corners down and get it to stick that way. However, this surface that I've got has like a, it's supposed to be non-stick, non-staining type surface. And the contact paper in particular doesn't really want to adhere to it all that well. So I'm going to tape mine down, but we're taping it down sticky side up. We want that sticky side looking up at us. As you can see, I've got it down. I've got the sticky side up. It's taped down. Ironically, the Dollar Tree masking tape sticks just fine to this surface, but the contact paper does not want to. I wanted to show you, this is what I peeled off of that, this waxy paper. I keep this for a lot of reasons, and you've seen it throughout videos. If you're playing with stickers and you want to rearrange them, alpha stickers, and you want to kind of arrange them to fit a project, this is a really good way to lay it out on this wax paper. It doesn't mess with the stickiness, and you can peel that right back up. Same for painting on these surfaces. If you paint on maybe just brown craft paper or some kind of paper, a lot of times when it dries, any paint around the edge of whatever you just painted can dry to that paper. When you go to pull it off, you're peeling off paint and paper all at the same time. This does not do that. There's lots of uses for it. So a big sheet like this will come in really handy for other projects. Now, I'm going to start pulling in some pieces. You can do this by hand, just sitting there holding them and painting them. I know it can make people cringe to see how messy I get when I paint, and I'll get it all over my hands, and I really don't care. It washes off pretty easily. But I wanted to show this way to be helpful. You can space them fairly close together if you want to get a lot on here. I'm going to need 30 something of these, just ballpark, I'm guessing, to do my 20 by 20. And this is a really great project to share with your kids. This is one that you can get them to help. These particular pieces, we are not shooting for perfect faux painting craftsmanship on these. It's not as important as it would be with your long faux wood strips. These we can really slide with some kind of shady looking paint jobs here. The biggest part of this is getting your design to stay within these points. If you want it going this direction, you could go on the horizon and go horizontal, but you would want to go straight across this piece. I like this diamond patterned up and down. So I'm bringing out my sponge and my paints. And this sponge probably still has some residual paints on it from me already playing with it. It's still probably a little moist. So I'm going to come in here and you can see this does not have to be complicated. I'm going to try to do some really light colors on these. I do have a batch that's already really dark in color. So I'm going to try to get as light as I can on some of these. I'm just doing this. This is going to give me a little bit of graining in this. It's not really necessary, and you'll see what I mean. I could very easily just do a piece like this. And I will try to make sure that I use this actual piece in there. And you can see exactly what I mean about this does not have to be perfection on your wood graining on this. This is a really good way to practice your colors. I'm only using one sponge, so you can see it's got some of the darker in it where I've used the ink and the clear. Right now I'm dipping into that antique color. And I'm really essentially just brushing across or sponging down some color. I'm going to do a couple like this, and you'll see how that blends in. Seems like it wouldn't, but it's going to. You can see that I am not reloading the sponge. I am trying to use what is on it. I do want to be careful when I hit those points there. You can really easily, as sharp as those are, these tips right here, it's very easy to make your paper surface peel up. So I didn't even add any more paint. I'm using the grungy that's on here, and I added a little clear wax. And I'm dragging those colors through. This batch is light. You could do some dark ones. I've already done some dark ones. And I'm just going to do that same thing. I'm going to pull this wax through, this clear wax, pull some of that color down. And you can see I'm keeping my graining all the same way. This is why I said even kids could do this, and it still turn into a great project. It's really not difficult, the paint job on this, because we're only seeing such a small portion at a time. So it doesn't have to be the quite as perfected. So I just dipped in some more wax on the other end of my sponge. I had kind of done it so that my antique is on this end and my black color is on this end. And I'm just, whatever griminess is on that sponge is what I'm wiping onto these. Got my fingers here, adding a little green into there, pushing down on that sponge in different spots. Do you see how simple it is sticking these down like this? It really speeds this process up rather than trying to hold each one and paint it individually. I don't know how many is sitting here, probably somewhere around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 21, 22 pieces sitting here already. Get me a little more wax here. Slide that out of my way. You can see I had all kinds of colors blended into this one. I mean, literally all kinds of colors. You can go really dark. You can go into your gray spectrum, keeping your brown spectrum. It really, any of them are going to look good. And I think the more color tones that you get in this piece, the prettier it tends to be. So I could turn around here and do a much darker one. There we go. We'll do a couple darker shades. Make sure that I cover up a few of these white spots here that I missed. Now, the cool thing is that most of our edge, as we're doing this, with them laid out like this, we're hitting a lot of this edge so the white's not showing. However, you guys know me, and I talk about this, doing this a lot. Here's some other pieces that I've already done. If you just leave these edges super white there, a lot of times you can have that little bit of white peeking through and it busts the entire illusion. You do not have to do the entire section, just a little bit of that top. Now, as I do that, it is also shading around kind of the edge of this diamond. And it's very subtle. I don't know if you can see that. Let me try it with one of these lighter guys, and you'll really be able to tell. Be careful when you go to pull these up, because it does stick really well. You can risk bending them. So this is a much lighter one. I'm going to go in and add that little bit of color and shading around that edge, so I don't have any white peeking through, but it's also going to set this diamond off as its own little piece. And let me see if I can put one close to it for comparison. Can you see those, the slight difference there in the edge, that slight subtle shading that goes on this edge? And I want to do this to all of my pieces. Now, if you were doing one that the pieces were really all this light, you probably could get away with not doing too much of it. Because like I said, a lot of it does get covered when we drag this paint across here with a sponge. But I, in particular, am going to be mixing darks and lights. So I want to make sure that each diamond stands out as its own individual piece and not have any white show through and ruin my illusion of wood. So I'm going to peel all of these off and stack them up and get the edges done. And then we'll start putting a background together. I did want to throw this note in. This is honestly the better sponge to be doing these edges with. These edges are sharp, especially on this piece. It's going to start shredding the sponge by the time you finish all these. This really is my preferred sponge. These hold up to this sharpness a whole lot better. As far as doing these edges, I decided to go ahead and switch over. You can see little clumps and pieces of where my sponge has started just with the few that I did already. My sponge is wanting to start to shred. That one I like for the wood grain look. This one I like for my edging, and you can do a whole lot of these before this ever shows anywhere. Okay, guys, this is where it gets exciting. So I've got my pieces all done. Got them in a stack over here randomly. I'm going to go ahead and pull out my big bad boy ruler here. And I want to measure out a middle point here. I'm using a 10 by 10 background. And I'm just going to give myself a middle point to lay these out. And you really can lay them out any which way you want to. But if you get your angle off a little bit, it can kind of go astray on you. So just marked up 10 inches. And I'm going to mark both. I'm going to mark the vertical and the horizon for this in the same manner. That should be good enough for how I want to align these. So for me, because I know how this pattern typically is going to somewhat lay out on a piece like this, your best bet is whatever you're working on, start right here in the center. And I didn't actually make that line long enough. I want to be able to get my 2 points at the tops to line out. I thought that would be long enough. However, it is not. So let's make it a little longer. I'll go ahead and do the whole thing. I've got a glare off my ruler, guys, so that's making it hard for me to... There we go. So typically I'm going to suggest take one of your diamonds, start in your very middle, and these 2 points right here I'm aligning with the horizontal, and these 2 points here I'm going to align with the vertical. Because I'm going to show you this way, there's actually a better way for me to lay it out. I could start here, but I'm going to go ahead and show you this way because I do find that this makes it pretty simple to get an alignment. So I want to go ahead and glue this down. You want to hot glue it. Hot glue is your best choice when using foam core, and it's no different with these. I'm going edge to edge on this to make sure that it secures down, and as I move this around, none of these pop up. And now you can see that these points are aligned here and these points are aligned here. That way I don't end up with an angle that kind of goes awkward. So I want you to see some of these really, don't even worry that they're not great paint jobs. This is certainly not something that you would want to do on your board strips, your faux boards that you do for a big project, but on something this small, this actually works really well. So I want to intermingle some of the gray pieces, some of the brown pieces, and we are going to start gluing down from there. And I tend to try to look at my pattern and rotate out these colors so that I get a good variety of colors going. I'm going to put this dark one over here. You can see why I said the edges for these is a little more important to get a clean edge than maybe on your faux boards, just because you want to really get those to bump in together. You can see where my shading now on those edges, where that little bit of extra color really sets these off individually. Oh, I don't really know where I want to put that piece. We are going to fill this in, and then we are going to build off the edge as well. I'm going to make sure I shove a piece in there so I know that this is on the right angle. Let's put a brown piece in there. I'm going to put this brown piece right there where it bounces off of that one. Let me get some of these light colors up in here. I have done some that are purely just these lighter shades that are barely brushed on or sponged on with my paint. It is gorgeous to do it in the much lighter shades. This, with these mix of darker and lighter shades right now, I think makes a gorgeous background for fall projects. You really want to get those points to stay down on your project surface, because they are a little riskier. I think I mentioned that while we were painting. They are definitely a little riskier with these sharp tips right here of kind of making your paper peel up. They really are. Let's see. I think maybe a gray, a lighter gray there. You don't have to be as picky about this. You could just go in and just pick up pieces and plant them down as you go, and not be as ridiculous as I am about making sure you're rotating colors. You can get the same colors next to one another. It's fine. You notice that I'm going to be going off the edge with my pieces, and you'll see why in the long run, in the grand scheme of things, this is your easier, simpler way. We're going to trim that overhang down later and reuse the pieces we've trimmed off to fill in spots that need to be filled in. As you can see, this right here will need to be filled in. And if we can trim these off nice and evenly, we can tuck those right into that space. So I'm going to continue to build out from here, following the same method. I'm just going to keep popping these in their place. There's a lot of good satisfaction that comes from this. Honestly, I find it very satisfying to pop these pieces in place. It's like putting together a puzzle. If you're a puzzle person, you're probably going to find this a physically satisfying craft to do. You can see how gorgeous all of those different green looks and colors, and you can see that these really light pale colors that don't have much to them. Now you see why I said don't worry about it. They will work fine. Let your kids sit and paint some of these for you, especially if you're going to do like a really big one. Use the help. Get the extra hands. They can't mess this up. Other than fingerprints, and you know what? I've been doing this a long time, and I still get fingerprints on things. So they can't do anything that as a crafter you likely haven't done. This is really a forgiving one as far as paint jobs. It's a good way to practice mixing your color tones, testing out different wood color tones. And y'all saw I used the very same sponge the entire time. I never changed it. I never cleaned it. It did not even matter. Look how pretty this looks together. I love this kind of Harlequin pattern. You're going to see more of this from me as fall rolls in. I've got some projects for fall that I want to use this diamond background pattern, although I don't necessarily know that I'm going to be using it in the wood graining. I'm going to be probably using it slightly differently. We're just going to keep going. So you can see I've gotten pretty close to my edges. This is where I am. It looks a little weird and scary, but you just really continue out this pattern off the edge of your backboard piece. These edge pieces I'm securing really well. If you notice, I'm going up against that edge when we hold this to hang it or whatever, you typically are holding it by one of these sides or edges or whatever. Those pieces need to be really stuck in place so that they don't pop up as this kind of flexes when you go to pick it up. So I secure those way extra than really a lot of these middle pieces. You can see I'm coming in all the way across. That's a lot of overhang, I realize that. But we're going to clean that edge up. It's going to look really nice when we're finished. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Get all of these pieces all the way up to this edge. Had I done my pattern the way that I said, instead of showing y'all starting directly in the middle because of this size, only because I've laid this pattern out before, I typically start with 2 off center so that I don't have these little bitty tiny spots right here to try to fill in. It's not a big deal. I'll be able to do that fine. But that was why I was going to start the other direction, just because I knew this particular size would, I knew how it was going to roll out when it was finally done. So you can see now this is what you want to, this is kind of where you want to get to. All this overhang, all this overage, these edges like this. Now you're going to flip this over. We're going to bring back out the big ruler so that I can really get to those edges. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come get my ruler bumped up against here. I'm taking my razor blade and flushing this against what's already there. Pushing my little poster putty dots, pushing those down so I don't get anything to slide, because I've got to cut through all this excess hot glue on these triangular tips. That tends to be a little more difficult to cut across, so I do not want any sliding on this. I'm going to do just like I do with any starting cut. I want to start above my cut, get that pressure going. These I might have to run through more than once to go through that hot glue that came over the edge like that. Let me get down to this very bottom one. Don't toss these. We're going to need these. Hopefully some of these will fit in right over here. So you'll see that I'm going to switch back and forth multiple times. And I'm wrong. These are not going to fit. You could make them fit, obviously, by the time you put a frame, but there will be a gap there. So I'm likely going to have to cut the tips off some other ones to fill mine in. Just because of the sizing, you can see it ends up being that way on both of them. Depending on what your sizing is, most of the time, you are absolutely capable of taking these little trimmed pieces and popping them right in there, and you're good. I could always trim this down to that size and use these anyway. And let's just see what that turns out to be. I think likely it would turn this into maybe a 19 by 19 piece or a 19 by 20 piece if I just trimmed down all the way across there. So I'm going to go ahead and trim this other side. And maybe, we'll see, maybe these will be long enough hanging off that edge. Same thing here. If you notice, I do these opposite sides first so that I can reuse those pieces and know that those pieces belong to that part of the pattern. And let's just see if any of these triangles may or may not be long enough. And it doesn't really look like these are going to be long enough either at this size, which is fine. I have extras that I painted out, and that's why I was saying that it was give or take on what you're going to use number-wise to fill that part in. And when you're calculating how many full sheets you're going to need, consider that whatever your backer size is, to cover that entirely with pieces, you're going to need at least another full-size sheet and probably a portion of another. in equivalence to whatever your backer piece is. So we're going to go ahead and trim this edge as well. And I probably can take a little piece off of this one for sure to fill in those tiny, tiny triangular gaps. And like I said, if you wanted to frame it out just like that and not worry about what you could see from the side, it's not a big deal. I like my sides flush so that from the side it looks like one solid piece of wood. So I don't like to leave the gaps where these smaller triangles would be. But I will show you, I've got like a little thin strip here. You can see that it would cover that just fine and you would not have to fill that in. But I would know that from the side it was like that. So I'm taking this little piece here. And I'm going to go ahead and add it there and then trim it down the very same way. It seems like a little bit of effort, especially on a spot that's small, but it does help fill those gaps in nicely. I like that it gives that more finished edge. I've shown before and suggested during multiple other ones that you can totally go in and use some putty. Dollar Tree sells putty, wood filler putty, spackling putty, this stuff. Do your edges, fill those in and get a more solid edge. Guys, don't cringe. I usually don't suggest cutting with scissors, but I don't need all of this piece. You can see what I mean. I can pop that right in there. All of the crunchy part that I just squished and did terrible with those scissors, I'm going to trim it back off. So, no big deal. Pop that there. And I'm just going to fill in these little gaps and trim them back down again. Now you can see I've got everything all nice and trim and flush. I'm going to flip this over and show you guys the final pattern here. Look at this. Can you see how pretty that is? Now your next step is just to come in and do whatever your framing is going to be. I have just some 1" by 30" painted strips in the faux wood. I am not going to put together the frame on this just yet. But I want to show you that. All I've got to do is trim all of these down to 20 by 20 and go ahead and miter them. And I'll show you how to miter those and pop those right in place. Okay, let's discuss the framing part. So I've got this 1" strip that is cut down perfectly even with the size of my project. This is how you're going to miter. You want your piece. I always get asked, do you go longer or add to it to account for this? No, we are going directly at this length all the way around when we cut these down. And I want to show you really quick how we're going to miter that. So I believe these strips are just 1" wide. They are. Let me double check that. Measure twice. So I'm going to turn it to this side. Maybe you'll see better. That one's 1" wide. So I want to create a square on this. And I'm going to mark 1" over. I want to come down across the diagonal from corner to corner of that perfect square. Get that aligned just right. I'm going to start my blade up here because we want these angles super sharp. And I'm going to swoop down through it. And I've got this really crisp point. I'm going to do the very same thing on here. You want to make sure that this angle, the longer point of this angle, stays all the way across here. And you want it to be the longer point here. So this one will go upwards that way. And you can kind of see what I mean. The longest points are on the same side and the shortest points are on the same side. So once again, you're going to come over, hit this 1" mark. Now I see that this is my tallest point, so I know I want to cut upwards towards that corner. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to get this alignment really nice. Slide that down because I want to start, especially on a corner like this where you're about to hit that corner. I want to start my blade ahead of time. This corner's already crunched in a little bit. If I just started right here, this blade is just going to want to crunch down that a little more. When I start up there, I get so much better of a cut. Now, just like we did with the diamond pieces, anywhere that you have cut and have this raw white edge, you want to go and tap a little color down to that. Doesn't have to be perfect, but sometimes that white can show like that. You can see, and we don't want that. So just popping even just a little color on there. You can take a cheat, use one of the markers like I've shown before, one of the Dollar Tree like furniture markers right here, and do the same thing. But these do bleed across that paper surface, which is why I tend to use it only for certain kind of projects. So all of my ends are done. So you can see I've kind of dry fit my frame a little bit, made sure that my angles are all pretty good, that they're going to line up pretty decent. And last part of this is I'm going to come in and glue these down. I typically use a whole lot of glue on these edge pieces, anything that touches the edge, so that as it wants to flex, I don't have to worry about any of this popping up. I'm using my fingers to push up against this flush side. It helps with my placement. The closer you get these sides sandwiched together, the better off that finished piece looks from the edge. When you walk past it, you're going to have a much cleaner look. This one, you're not going to have like perfectly sandwich looking edges, just because of where these patterns here stop on the side. But when we fill in the color on the edge, and kind of do our final little details, like I like to call that my quality control. When I go to do those edges and get that paint on there, most of that's going to look fine. Once that color is a solid darker color, you don't notice nearly as much of where these different pieces are kind of patchworked together to create our pattern. And I'm mushing this in here. Hold it in place so it doesn't slide. And this is what I'm talking about. Once we put some of our paint onto that, I'm just going to grab a little bit. I'm not going to do this whole thing because it gets messy. But you're going to come across here, do these edges, and by the time you do, that all really blends out. And it's really not noticeable at all. You can see that. I may need another coat around that edge to really finish it. Same thing with this bottom. If you've got any glue strings, go ahead and do that during your quality control kind of portion while you're doing your edges. Clean up your glue strings. If you have any perforated edges where it was cut by the manufacturer sheet by sheet, before you apply that paint along these edges, like this one is the perforated edge, I am very, very lightly taking this Dollar Tree sanding block. And I mean, I am not putting any pressure. I'm basically dragging it across there because it will tear into that paper pretty quickly. But it knocks off a lot of those little bumpies there from the perforation. Also, if you've got a little glue overage or things like that, this helps clean that up. If your cuts on your frame edge were not beautiful, that cleans it up. This is what you get at the end. You could really use this as a piece by itself. I literally just walked through, grabbed some things, rough to scale. This was the Halloween one that I showed before. You can see anything you set in the center of this is really going to be showcased. You can see how nice that looks. I'm going to take just this little wreath. So at this point, this is an amazing backer for anything you really want to add. If you picked up maybe a monogram initial and want to make that a big piece, pop it right there in the center. I can see a white monogram looking fantastic in there. I have used a deer head. I've used a wooden wreath that Walmart sells in the center of this. I did a deer head and a wood stain. It looks fantastic. Up against it, you pretty much can do anything on this piece from this point. If you wanted to do some vinyl on this, I will tell you that vinyl on this particular surface, this particular background, is a little more complicated. You could always put a vinyl monogram, but you've got where some of these pieces are a little thicker than others. If you've already played with vinyl on this material, you know that vinyl is a little flaky about wanting to stick to this waxed surface. That has to do with the stickiness and then the wax paints we use. So you would have a little more work trying to get your vinyl over these spaces, but I think you could still very well do it. You could always turn it on its side if you wanted to. I do like it up and down. I'm going to be doing other projects that are actually full projects like this, but I wanted to get this out there so that you guys could run with it and really customize some of your pieces other than just wood slat backgrounds. This is a really fun way. I think it's a very classic look. It's certainly unique. I love the varieties here. I love that it really didn't take as strong of paint skills that you would want for your wood pieces or your faux wood pieces. The paint skills really are, it could be the worst pieces that you had and it still is going to end with a really great result. So that's all I've got for you guys. I'm looking forward to doing a few others. I hope you at least picked up something out of this, got an idea out of this, and maybe you get a little chance to do some crafting. I think I am going to have to very soon go ahead and jump on the fall bandwagon. Obviously, Dollar Tree has some really cute things out. So a lot of the next ones are probably going to be geared towards fall. I do have some basic crafts that I really want to knock out and share with you guys. I love that wreath on there. I really do. I love all those wood tones behind it and that bright green up against it. Sidetrack, squirrel moment, but I do have some just general projects planned as well. This was certainly one of them. I've got a really fun idea with a background that I have not done a project with just yet. I've laid it out, tested it out. I think I want to share it. It may not be something for everybody, but for those of you into the farmhouse look and the black and white stuff and that kind of thing, that one will be fun. Halloween, I'm looking forward to. That's one of my favorite holidays to decorate for because you really can get away with some bold colors. But that's it. That's all I got. Give yourself some grace on doing this. Give yourself a little bit of ability to play. This is great playtime for your wood graining and your wood practicing. I really should have introduced this sooner, other than the cuts being a little more difficult. I really should have introduced this sooner as a way to practice painting. Whoops. And really having a piece that is so forgiving. That's all. Talk to you guys soon. Bye, y'all.